We continue now with reaction to the fourth quarter unemployment statistics. I'm joined by Mr. Luyolo Mphithi, a DA national youth leader and MP, as well as Mr. Lindokuhle Xulu, who is the ANC Youth League activist. A very good afternoon to both of you, gentlemen. Let's start with the unemployment numbers that we see that specifically speak to the state of the youth. Luyolo, just your reactions on these particular numbers. We know that youth unemployment has been a problem for quite a while. Were you expecting them to come out any differently?
Thank you so much, Thami, for having me, and a very good afternoon to your listeners. I think let's be clear that we were facing severe economic conditions long before the pandemic took place. We knew long before the pandemic that millions of young people were without jobs. We knew long before the pandemic that the majority of young people in this country found themselves at the periphery of this economy, excluded and not seen at all. So this government has failed to put a reform agenda that centers young people and puts young people at the center of being able to find jobs. And the reality of the matter is these stats tell us only one thing, that this generation is now at risk of not being able to find a job or to work their entire lives. So we are looking at a situation that is very intense, particularly for young people in this country. When you look at the stats, you see a very bleak picture of what has been happening long before this pandemic. And we need to be clear about that, Thami, because one thing that we are seeing now is that there is a justification to say that these numbers are the way that they are because of the pandemic. And that is not the truth. The truth is that young people have been unemployed in this country long before. In fact, in 2016, it was also done where statistically South Africa at that point was ranking the highest when it came to youth unemployment. And still to this day, we are still part of the top 5 countries with the highest youth unemployment rate. So we are tired of the government bailing out SAA and putting the lives of the future of this country on the back seat. So we need some answers from this government. We need a plan as to how this budget is going to address, in particular, the concerns of young people and the fact that young people don't have jobs.
Mr. Xulu, let me bring you in here as a member of the ANC Youth League. Your perspective on why it seems that the measures that had been put in place do not seem to have yielded any sort of positive results. We've had the president putting together relief measures and schemes, as well as the NYDA being capacitated to be able to support young people who are wanting to enter industries. Your thoughts on why these have not yielded results?
Yes, well, firstly, I must acknowledge that this is more than what was expected. Obviously, some economists have come and predicted that you might be looking into the increase of unemployment and it might be 54%. So anything above 60% is a serious deviation of what has been predicted. So it tells you that COVID did have an impact on how things look like. Because if we deny that, we'll be then trying to say that government has not done anything. But we must also acknowledge that if you look carefully in what the Statistician General is saying, you will find that the banking sector recorded more job losses. And that is no accident, because we know that government at the current moment is only responsible of creating a conducive environment for private sector to be able to create jobs, and government has done that. But the private sector, because of its obsession of profit and maximization of profit, has tried to use and manipulate the current situation to maximize profit. You'll remember that last year, there was Standard Bank that was trying to fire people and replacing them with technology. And it's true that the unemployment has been going on for a long time, but we can't just take the blame to government and be afraid to really try and hold the private sector accountable. And it's true that the private sector in this country is not patriotic enough to be an ally to government in terms of making sure that whatever the government says gets implemented and they become a willing partner in creating jobs and employment. And government has done a lot. Even the president of the country has done a lot, but they need support.
Are you saying then, Ndoguhle, that you're putting the blame of youth unemployment at the doorstep of the private sector? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, private sector is responsible for this crisis. The only responsibility and the mistake that government does is not to intervene aggressively in the market and in the private sector, and not to force the private sector to implement the resolution of government. So government, remember, in the open market economy like ours, government can hardly create jobs. Government can create a conducive environment for business to create jobs. So to then say government is solemnly responsible for this is misleading. Government has done a lot to create.
We had a conversation just a short while ago, Mr. Kulu, with Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, who brought this point up, saying that government's policies are the ones that are not conducive to an economy that is self-sustaining, an economy that's driven by production and manufacturing, that instead, in as much as we may have the minerals and we may have the basic resources, but we are still an economy that imports as opposed to manufactures and produces. And that is at the doorstep of government and the policies that they put in place. Your thoughts on that?
Well, what Mr. Vavi is saying is more on the economic inclusive growth from point of view. It's true that our economy remains colonial in character, and we still depend on import of raw materials instead of beneficiating them. But in terms of immediate interventions, I believe government has done pretty much very well to intervene in the economy. Government has went as far as creating youth wage subsidy, practically paying the private sector for employing people, because the private sector is only obsessed about profits. They want to do or to make over profit, and government has come to say to them, you can employ young people without losing money, because their argument has always been that when they employ young people, they will lose some income because these people are not skilled, they are not experienced. Government has come and tried to cover that. What the private sector has done, it has only employed people that they were going to employ anyway, and it has misled and manipulated government. So I think if we are going to then try and blame government for all the problems that we have in this country, we are not going to solve anything. I think now it's a point where we must hold private sector accountable for some of the misfortunes that we are facing as the nation.
And we leave it at that for now, Mr. Kulu. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. I'd just like to ask you, Mr. Mphithi, tomorrow we are expecting the Minister of Finance to deliver his budget speech. What do you hope he will address that will speak specifically to the issues of youth and youth unemployment?
Thank you. I think one of the most important things that we need to be looking at in this budget is how exactly the government is going to re-stimulate the employment tax incentive, where we give young people between the ages of 18 to 29 the opportunity to be able to gain skills in this current economy that we are in. It is not going to be possible for us to move forward with a plan that does not prioritize the employment tax incentive, that does not bring in the private sector closer to work with government to provide these opportunities and skill our young people in this country to be able to find jobs. We need definitive, clear outcomes on the cadre deployment policy of the ANC. We've seen how the cadre deployment of the ANC has destroyed the NYDA. We see the recommended list, which is being discussed and tabled today in Parliament, consists 6 out of the 7 candidates are ANC members, which again demonstrates the fact that this government does not believe in young, talented people in this country who are educated and who are willing to take this country forward and bring innovative ideas into the space to create employment and help us fight youth unemployment in this country. And so when we are not inspired as young people because this government is failing to give young people who are skilled the opportunities to rise up and be partakers of this economy, we fail them at the first step. So we expect the budget to speak to these issues, to address the fact that SAA has been receiving bailouts year after year. That money could have gone to assist young people in being able to fund their businesses, to fund their entrepreneurial ventures that they have. But instead, it's gone out to bail out an entity that has continued to not give us any returns, and in fact has wasted the taxpayers' money. So we expect definitive answers from this budget. We expect the budget to speak and reform exactly what young people have to do and are willing to do to survive in this economy. So we hope it will center young people and that the agenda of reform will be put on the table.
Well, thank you so much to both of you, gentlemen, for your time this afternoon. Unfortunately, time they're not on our side. That's Mr. Luyolo Mphithi, the DA's youth member there, and Lindotolo Lulu, the ANC Youth League.